Hello again. Last video in this series of 3 videos for your final essay, the descriptive narrative. So this last unit is on diction, tone, and style. So we previously talked about narration, which is storytelling, having plot, characters, conflict of some sort. Description is using those 5 senses: touch, taste, sight, smell, and sound, being able to incorporate, make your reader feel like they're experiencing the conflict or the plot with you. And then finally, we're going to touch on narration, which is, diction, tone, and style, which is specifically the words that you choose and the style in which you write them. So a few things to be aware of. This is a thing that you can do as you do your final comb through of your essay. Know what words that you confuse easily. There are lots of words in the English dictionary or English language that sound the same, that are spelled similarly, but mean completely different things. If you know you have a few specific ones that you trip up frequently, just do a double check. Make sure you're using the correct word as you do a final proofread of your essay. Remembering last time when we talked about description, using those concrete, specific words, remembering concrete is something that you can drop on your foot and you would feel it. It's a tangible thing that you can use your senses to describe, whereas abstract words are those words that involve emotions or concepts. And as readers, we probably have different notions of what those things are. So if you can be more concrete in your writing, you are going to have a better chance of communicating with your audience. Also, the more specific you can be, the better. So rather than she had blonde hair, moving it to she had frizzy platinum blonde hair creates a starker, more vivid image in my mind. There's lots of shades of blonde hair, brown hair, black hair. So specificity can be your friend for this final essay. I'm asking you to push yourselves with your vocabulary or your diction, your word choice for this last essay. Move yourself out of the regular words that you rely upon and try some new ones out. Use your thesaurus, use those tools at your fingertips. I wanted to talk a little bit about the various word usages and being aware of them. If this PowerPoint is linked up on Blackboard, and if you click that yellow link, you will be taken to a 2 or 3 minute video by a guy named Flula, who was in the Pitch Perfect films, maybe 2 and 3. And he's a non-native English speaker. And so idioms are phrases that we create in our language and our culture that are really hard for people who are not native speakers to understand. And I have some examples on the screen there. Pie in the sky, toot your own horn, under the weather, high as a kite, chip on your shoulder. These are non-literal phrases, but as English speakers who grew up in our culture, we know usually instinctively what they mean. So if you have somebody who's coming over and you know you have people who are in your audience who are not native speakers, using phrases like this can be really confusing. I have found this especially difficult. I work with a lot of international students over at UWL, and when we meet them and we talk to them, it's amazing how much we rely upon these idioms and cliches to describe things, and they're lost on people who don't grow up in our culture. And each culture has their own idioms and cliches that make sense to them, but if you're learning their language, can be really confusing. So be aware of using those in your writing, especially if you have people in your audience who will not be native speakers. You can use things like usage labels. So when we talk about talking about dialogue, you can have people talk to each other in a way that's not proper English. If they are from the Midwest, we have phrases and words that we use that are not necessarily used in other parts of the country or other parts of the world. And so you can have your dialogue sound like that. I've been watching a lot of Charlie Barron's on Facebook, the guy who's from the Manitowoc Minute, and he has a real good, Midwest accent, and he talks about say hi's to your mom and them and kind of things. And we have phrases that we use that connote where we're from, that people can hear and recognize. Oh, you're from the East Coast or you're from the South. So if you have characters in your story who talk like that, let your dialogue reflect that. The level of diction is how formal it is. For most of what you've written in this class, it's been formal, semi-informal. For this last essay, because you're writing a story, you can have kind of a combination of all of these, probably formal, informal, some colloquial or slang. You're probably not going to use a lot of technical jargon in this. And then you have denotation connotation. Every word has a dictionary literal definition. So if I look up the word snake in the dictionary, I know that it's a reptile that slithers through the grass. But if I call somebody a snake, that has a completely different connotative meaning. And connotative just means the emotional, cultural context that we give a word. And unfortunately for the animal kingdom, we use animals a lot when we talk about things like this. So my brother was being a real ass, in the traditional sense of the word, meant he was being like a donkey. He was being stubborn. Or my brother is a bear to wake up in the morning. So he's difficult, he's stubborn, he's hard, he's maybe cranky, he's moody. He's a real pig in the kitchen. So he's sloppy, he's slovenly, maybe he makes a mess of things. Again, poor animals, they get this reputation. But denotation is the actual dictionary definition, whereas connotation is the emotional or cultural definition. So the words that you use can carry both of those. So be aware of that when you're writing. Again, we talked about tone. That's the mood we create based on the details that we include and the words that we choose. And for this essay, you're probably not going to be objective. You're going to be subjective. When you're in the professional workplace and writing professionally to employees, coworkers, higher ups, you're going to try to be objective, professional, formal, removing your own personal emotions and biases. However, when you're writing stories, you're probably going to be more subjective. So I am telling you how I feel about this event. I am letting you know throughout the story and the cues that I give you how I feel. And so that gives you more freedom with the words that you choose. I do this activity in class, and you can click through these. This is the song Hallelujah, which probably many of you are familiar with through the movie Shrek. It was originally written by Leonard Cohen, and there are 4 different versions of the song. Each performer does the song differently, and it's a good exercise in looking at tone. Some of them are more uplifting, some of them are sadder, some of them are somber and sad, and it's the same song, it's the same words, but it's delivered differently. So you guys might be writing about similar stories or similar topics, but the words that you choose to use, the character details that you choose, will differentiate your tones from each other. All right, so you get into figurative language, and I'm asking you to use some varieties of figurative language in this final essay: similes, metaphors, oxymorons, irony, things of that sort. And again, PowerPoint is up on Blackboard. Click through some of these. There's some clips that are kind of funny and cute that you can take a look at. But some of the most common ones are, before I get to what I was going to say, here's an example of not great figurative language that people use. And not great figurative language is figurative language that doesn't make sense, isn't relatable, is cliched, is overly long and complicated. You want it to be fresh, and you want to avoid cliches. So here's some examples of similes and metaphors. Similes use like or as. Metaphors are one noun equals another noun. So one thing equals the other. And these can take some time to tinker with, especially if you want to avoid cliches and to be fresh and authentic in your writing. So try to push yourself again. Sometimes I will Google similes, metaphors, and look at a list. And okay, I want to avoid those that I know are common. So if I'm trying to describe somebody's eyes that are green, I might not say something, her eyes were as green as the grass in the meadow. I might make a list of everything that's green that I think is either beautiful or ugly, depending on the connotation I want to create, and then compare it to that so that you can give your reader something to visualize. Figurative language makes things more beautiful, and it amplifies the description of it because it's often related to poetry and songwriting. You know, if you have favorite poets or songwriters, go back and read their lyrics or read the poems and see how they use figurative language to describe things. One of my geeky favorite things to do is, as I'm reading, if I find a new simile or metaphor that I love that I've never seen before, I write it down in a journal to keep track of it because it's like something that I've never thought of. I remember reading a book about a woman describing her grandmother's cheeks. And, you know, grandmothers are older and their skin sometimes can be saggy, but she talked about how they felt like peaches. They have that soft kind of peach fuzz to them. And that stuck with me for years now. So think about figurative language in a fresh way that helps us to imagine. Personification is when we give human-like qualities to things that are not human, non-living things. And so that time never waits. Time's not waiting for anybody. It's not a real thing, but we say that time never waits. The bed groaned. Beds don't groan. They can make noises, but it's not a person groaning. So personification gives human-like qualities to non-living things. Over and understatement, exaggerating or diminishing things for effect. There's some examples on the screen for you. And then irony, saying one thing and meaning the other, often associated with sarcasm. So those are some examples of figurative language that you can use. Maybe you know a person who speaks in similes or hyperbole. You can use that in dialogue too. And then finally, as you move through, try to get rid of bloated phrases. There is, are, was, and were, things that can be said in one sentence versus 5. So due to the fact that is just simply because. That's again one thing that you can do as you make your way through the end of your essay and proofreading. So go through, look at this PowerPoint. The George Carlin piece has some F words in it, so be aware of that. It's an older piece, but he does a really nice job of talking about euphemisms, the way that we soften language, and then being aware of mixing your metaphors and using sexist language that excludes others. So that's a little bit about diction, tone, and style. Again, my favorite essay for you guys to write, my favorite essay for you to read. That's why I end on it, because it's the one that gives me the most pleasure. It's the one where I feel like my students really get to stretch their writing muscles and strut their stuff when they're writing about these stories. So I hope that these videos helped. And if you have questions, please let me know. As